So I'm joined by athletic beat writer for the Washington football team, Rhiannon Walker. Rhiannon, how you doing?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right, RJ. How's everything treating you over there?
It's Oklahoma. We plan to play college football. As stupid as I think that is, but if we gonna play, I'm gonna be here talking about it. And it seems like the NFL is in a much better spot than we are. But now, I mean, you've been in the thick of something that I think is very, very interesting and cool, especially given your experience. So, like, when the news broke that Jason Wright was going to be the new president of Daniel Snyder's Washington football team, what did you think?
First I wanted to know who it was about. I mean, that was my honest reaction.
Hmm.
Actually, no, my honest reaction was that this team is trying to run me into the ground right now. Waking up at 7:30 to this news, Robin Roberts teasing this news, and I'm just thinking to myself, y'all, the Alex Smith news. Obviously, the team didn't release it. The Alex Smith news dropped at 11 something at night. It was either on Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember the day. And then, of course, the Darius Geis news broke in the afternoon on Friday. So I'm just like, you guys are actually trying to put me into an early grave. I see that now. And that's fine. That's fine. And I just got back from vacation too that day. So it was like, well, at least you saved it for after that. That's all I have to say about that. But it was cool. It was very cool to see it happen. Wanting to get to know more about Jason Wright after seeing that he was the person now being named team president and the first black team president in the NFL. Obviously, you may know, your listeners may not know, I used to write for ESPN's The Undefeated, which writes about the intersection of race, sports, and culture. So this was something that I was pretty knowledgeable about beforehand, just in terms of the lack of numbers that have been there previously. And just the historical context of it, which I talked about at the very beginning of my story, the fact that this is the franchise that integrated the last out of the group in 1962 and only did so with federal pressure on them, and the other historical milestones that have occurred this year with Ron, first minority coach in the franchise's history, Jennifer King, first full-time black female coach in NFL, Astasia Williams, first black woman to lead an NFL social team, Julie Donaldson, obviously she's the first woman to be a regular on a radio broadcast booth. Jason is just the most recent historical figure to be brought into the organization that I gave credit to Ron, because again, like, Daniel Snyder could have done any of these things in the 20 plus years prior to Ron being hired, and that was not the case. But I know for a definitive fact that Ron Rivera has talked about being an advocate of change, giving people opportunities, hiring the best candidate. Because I want to make that, I think I made that clear, is that people aren't just being given opportunities because they want diversity. These people are also very good at what they do. Everyone who's talked about Jason Wright has talked about how qualified he is. And that's the other thing, is that there should have been a black team president before this. He was not the first one that was qualified for this job. I'm very happy that he got this job, but to make this very clear, this is a league that is 70% black, and you're just not getting your first team president. I'm very happy that Ron and Daniel Snyder were able to make that happen, especially the history of the organization, especially considering they just took down George Preston Marshall's statue. He was a segregationist, the first team owner of Washington. I think this is all great in the historical context, but I think it's important to look at it from that context, not just like, oh, great, we got the first one, but yeah, this shouldn't be happening in 2020, guys. Like, this should have been a thing.
It's also on top of crises after crises for that franchise in particular. And I've always been kind of fascinated with Washington for a number of reasons. One, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
in part in direct opposition to that team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that gets spoken enough about black sports fans. Many times I'm picking teams based on what is your history with black folks, right? In particular in the NFL, but also where I live, right, in the state of Oklahoma, I
Mm-hmm.
get to say things like, it's the University of Texas that was last to integrate. Y'all understand that, right? It wasn't Oklahoma. Oklahoma did that in 56, a couple years after the Brown v. Board of Education, but I mean, it's still Oklahoma, in which, we wild races out here too. Thing is,
Mm-hmm.
though, with all those first that you just named,
Mm-hmm.
Jason Wright coming from McKenzie, I meet with a bit of skepticism because I associate McKenzie with Jeff Lunow, right, who used to be the general manager for the Astros, and they had this real data-driven, sort of inhumane, if you will, way of doing business where they looked at their players as sort of assets rather than human beings and had a hard time really making those things reconcile. What is your read on Jason Wright and how he does business?
I guess I'd say it's still funny missing Jeff Ludhow, because one of the other things about Jason Wright is he's the fourth player to occupy a team presidency. So unlike Jeff Ludhow, who was not a player and depended on analytics and numbers and did treat his players as assets, Jason Wright was the asset in this situation. He knows what it's like to be in a locker room. He knows what it's like to lead men. He's been a team captain for the Cardinals, on a team that had Kurt Warner, Anquan Bolden, Larry Fitzgerald, and I believe Darnell Dockett too while I'm at it.
Yep.
And he was a team president for the Northwestern Wildcats while he was there as well too. And they won their first Big Ten championship in years. They beat Ohio State for the first time since 1971 when he was there. So that comparison to me falls very short, because again, one was about the experience of being a player going through those rigors. The other one was not. I don't expect the same level of it. Was hired for this job is because he does get both sides of it. He'll have no impact on, I shouldn't say no impact. He'll have no say-so on the football side of things, even though he is a former football player. But part of the reason he was brought in is because of the fact that he played football, and he does get both sides of it. Even if he will not be a participant on the football side of it, he can certainly be somebody that can be engaged and understand that component of it and get that side of it as well too. He brings a different perspective, and that was a lot of this hiring, was that they've had searches for other people, brought in people that come from the same general circle. Vinny Cerrato is a lifelong footballer. Bruce Allen's a lifelong football guy. Jason Wright has been in football, but not in the executive capacity. And the executive capacity where he was a partner at McKinsey & Company, he was the one that was leading their anti-racism and inclusion the team. And he was at a company that dealt with crisis management. One could say Washington has had a lot of crisis they need to deal with. So the Jeff Ludhow one is not a fair comparison to me. It's very apples to oranges. Just off of the experience the two of them have, based on the personality, people don't like Jeff Ludhow. That came out before the cheating with the Astros. It's very obvious after the fact. People did not care for him. They thought he was arrogant. They thought that he thought very highly of himself. That has not been any of the stuff I've heard about Jason Wright. Quite the opposite. And every conversation I've had and the interviews I did for this extra story I'm doing, it's about how he finds a way to relate to people, the level of empathy that he has, his ability to move through and talk to different kinds of people. From everything I understand about Jeff Ludhow, that is not the case. Maybe he could talk to certain people and get their perspective, but not all people. That is very different from Jason Wright. And this is a complete, I'll just stay there. That's what I'll end with.
No, I mean, that's fair, right? And that's what I'm looking for. Give me your perspective, I appreciate you rounding out who Jason Wright is, and I see the Big Ten comparisons all over the place with this, and this is where I want to take this conversation, because right now I do a lot of talking about college football because that's where I live and that's what I love, right? I dabble in the NFL, I dabble in other sports, but my passion is college football. To that degree, Kevin Warren is the Big Ten commissioner, and he is very much run aground with players and coaches in the Big Ten he works at the leisure of the university presidents who want to act like they don't know nothing, but he's out there carrying the water. As I understand it, Kevin Warren was going to be who Jason Wright has turned out to be. And the comparisons there seem to be a little different, but I'm not sure how, because the only thing that I can get out of reading all these articles about Kevin Warren in the NFL and Jason Wright in the NFL is what you just said, which is Jason Wright has played and has that experience, but it's not necessarily a capacity for which that's needed. It's helpful, right? Anytime you're going into a business where you were once an employee, of course, it's helpful. But what was the read from the Kevin Warren situation to the Jason Wright situation, and why are those two things overlapping in the course of our discussions in media?
To be frank, I hadn't even heard that comparison.
Okay. Well, I had heard it from the Undefeated with Jason Reed, who wrote about Jason Wright to a degree. And he was making a point that Roger Goodell had handpicked Kevin Warren for a job that they wanted him to pursue when he took the job as the head of the Big Ten. So that's why I brought it up.
I I don't usually talk on things. It's like if I had read the article and I had a better understanding of what was said in the article, I would be more than happy to talk about it. But seeing as I have not read the article, I did not hear these comparisons. I would be talking from an ignorant standpoint, and I really don't like to do that.
You are really being professorial about this, and I appreciate it. So, like, what do you think is the story here with Jason Wright?
I mean, I like to be honest. I hate to pontificate like I know information I don't know. I tell people name. Yeah, that's not my thing. I mean, people can speculate like it's the Wild Wild West, and that's their thing. That's not my thing, and I'm cool. I don't think it's a bad thing if I'm not saying this to you. I'm just saying in general for people that don't know me. Like, it's not a bad thing if you don't know something. I think the best thing you can do is say you don't know something and ask to know something or whatever. So I mean, I might go from this and decide to see what that comparison is, just to have a better understanding the next time somebody asks me the question. I actually can talk about it. So with Jason, I say this, and I kind of said this before, is that he's got this tall task ahead of him, and he looks at this situation like a challenge, and that to me that seems a bit like an understatement, frankly. He's the youngest team president that's ever been hired in the NFL. Like I said, he's the first black one, and he's the fourth one to be a former player. He has this unique perspective. He has the credentials more than anything else. And I say this again, I am very happy that he has this job. I'm happy that he has this job. I know people in the city of Washington, D.C., which you may know, and maybe some people don't know, is Chocolate City. It's the first major city to have a majority black population. And so it is very cool that this history is happening in Chocolate City. The city is also ecstatic about the fact that former Howard alum, no matter how you feel about her, Kamala Harris, is also the first black woman to receive the vice presidential nomination. The city is just having it up right now, kind of a situation. So it's cool. It's this hope that this is what it looks like when there's an actually fair hiring process, when you don't just hire people from the same pool of people that everybody always gets pulled from, essentially, and working with a head coach that will do what he can to make sure that he succeeds. Jason went to the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, which is highly reputable with high honors. He's a smart guy, and he has the task of trying to figure out a new stadium in the next few years. 2025 is when the lease is up for FedEx Field. Again, like, he won't have anything on the football side, but as a former player, if anybody knows what you look for on a playing field, like what kind of materials, what kind of environment makes for the best playing experience, it would be this guy. Now, I know his experiences are years ago and some things have changed, but just to say like that's helpful. Or in this team name change and things of that nature, like getting players, the community, the organization involved in that kind of stuff, so everybody feels like they have a say-so in the matter. That is important. And the fact that he said, like, it's not just a team name change, it's a rebranding of the organization as a whole. Because Dan Snyder has already conceded when he introduced Ron Rivera that he had to look at himself and decide, why is it that since I've bought this team, we have not been successful? We have never been able to not only really have success, but then maintain the success that we have had it for a season or two. Why is that? Who do I need to bring in order to make that happen? How do I need to open up my mind to different things in order to create a different environment, something that is different than what I've done in the past that has yielded this result? How do I create a different pathway that could get me the result I actually want? Because here's the thing, if Jason Wright succeeds, that's the hope. If he succeeds, he opens up the doors for others, because right now it's taken a long time for former players, black people, to get into the league and coaching positions. This last cycle, Ron Rivera was the only minority coach hired. You see somebody that was a former special teams coach getting a job. You've seen coaches that have previously had experience getting jobs again. You see Eric Bieniemy, who just won a Super Bowl as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, not getting a head coaching job, as if he's not already qualified. It's not like they didn't just play in the AFC Championship game the year before, And if not for an offsides penalty, I can't remember the player's name off the top of my head right now, but if not for an offsides penalty, they would have had an interception. The game would have been over. They would have gone to the Super Bowl the year before that. That's not just how things shook out. But basically, this idea that, he can set the tone for other people, and it may take a while because, again, like, you look at Eric Bieniemy, it's like he's done everything you possibly can do that you can ask of a coach in the situation. It's like the fact that he does not have a head coaching gig is a shame. It really, really is. When you look at the other people that got head coaching jobs, they have not done nearly as much stuff as he has. That's just a fact. And if this is a meritocracy, then he should have been rewarded for that. Or we talk about the lack of black people in general manager positions or the assistant general manager positions, so they're on the track to become the general manager. you hope that he has so much success that teams around the league look at it and say, like, who are we not considering that may be able to help our franchise? Like, who do we need to look at? Like, who do we need to talk to in order to bring in somebody that can really get us to the result that we want us to get to? We've been looking in the same general pool of talent, and that has not yielded the results we want. So now let's look outside of that. Who can we find? That is the hope here. That is, and excuse me, like Ron Rivera, Jason Wright said, I've got some broad shoulders, and I want to come in, I want to step into this challenge. Not only the name change, not only the rebranding, not only the stadium. This is a team that month before he got here, 15 former employees, 2 female reporters are talking about being sexually harassed by members of the organization. So he has to redo the culture too, for that matter. There's a lot that he has to handle, and he knew all this coming into the job, and he still decided to take it on. Both he and Ron are going to have to work together to make those changes, to bring in the right people to continue to take this culture forward. And that's really the expectation, is that before you see the long-term stuff, I would say this is a little short-term, is that the culture change. You bring in 2 guys that are so highly respected around the league and in the general football world, and you hope that they can bring in additional people that either look like them or people with different thoughts, different backgrounds, to create this diverse entity that can succeed long-term down the road. That is the ultimate hope for Jason Wright and this organization getting together.
The football. Are they going to be any good on the football field? Because I look at the pieces that are around them from just what I know about those kids in college, Chase Young, Terry McLaurin, Dwayne Haskins. For some folks, it feels like Ohio State East. Adrian Peterson is still playing football because he's an actual mutant. How do you feel about the football team and its prospects in this really weird year where we're all wearing masks and we're all trying to do our parts to get through this pandemic?
I've said before, I think this is maybe a 6-10, 7-9 team. Okay. And for a team that just went 3-13 last year, that's, double the wins or more than double the wins. They have the 4th worst schedule in the NFL. And also, I think that defense, this is the best defensive coordinator they've had since Dan Snyder took over the team. He has the best success rate as defensive coordinator. And they've brought in other people that have succeeded as well too. I've talked about the fact that Chris Harris, the secondary ranking for the Chargers when he was with them from 2016 to 2019, they were the highest rated secondary in the league for Pro Football Focus. I talked about the fact that his first season they had 18 interceptions, which led the league. They had 11 different players get interceptions, which also led the league. That was the next season. They had 18 interceptions that next year. I've talked about that. I've talked about the fact that Sam Mills, as the defensive line coach in Carolina, no team had more sacks than the Panthers. I think it was 368 since 2012. So now you brought him in to work with your 4 former first-rounders, including Chase Young, Ryan Kerrigan, Deron Payne, and Jonathan Allen. You have Matt Ioannidis, who was the 3rd-ranked interior lineman behind Aaron Donald, and I can't remember the other player's name right now off the top of my head. You have Tim Settle, who's very good depth on this team. Jordan Brailford, who's your 7th-round pick last year, is wreaking havoc so far through training camp. I look at that defense and I think to myself, if the offense just gives them a little bit, sometimes just manages the game. With the running game they have, they should be able to do that to some extent. If they can manage that, this defense might just help them. They just had 3 interceptions today at practice. They had 2 the practice before on Thursday when we left out. You have some young players that are starting to step up, starting to play with this confidence. And especially if that defensive line is creating the havoc that you anticipate with the 4 first-rounders, a 2nd-round pick, 5th-round pick, who is the 3rd-rated the interior lineman defensively, you should have some success. That should definitely be the case. And if it pans out that way, then like I said, 6 or 7 wins can be really good. And Thomas Davis, who was on that 2011 team when Ron Rivera came in as his first time as a head coach, the team was 2-14 when he got there. They had a lot less talent. I mean, I think Jake Loam wasn't even on the team anymore. Like, they had stripped the team of talent. They were completely in a rebuild. This team is rebuilding, but it's not a complete rebuild, if that makes a ton of sense. And he's like, this talent is better here than what we had when we had our first year in Carolina. If you just get guys to buy into the system, to play at top speed all the time, to give maximum effort, you could find some teams surprised. And I do believe that. I genuinely do believe that. I don't think anybody really expects anything of this team. And I'm not expecting this team to go to the playoffs. If they do, that's great. That's awesome. I'd love to cover a playoff team. But I think that in their first season under Ron Rivera, they have to get used to what he's asking of them, because comparatively, as everyone knows, Jay Gruden did not run a tough training camp. Ron Rivera is. He just got on their, excuse my French, he got on their asses today about the fact that he needs better effort. He needs them to give maximum effort the entire practice. For 3/4 of the practice, y'all were good. But that last quarter, y'all did not live up to the standards and the expectations that we have here as coaches. So I think if they do give, I think if you play sports, you get it. If you give maximum effort, you can have a team that's more talented than you. And there are teams that are more talented than them without question. Then they just might be able to outplay them just because of that talent. But those teams that give a lot of effort, if you think about that Texas Tech team that went to the 2019 NCAA championship, that was a max effort team. Like, you think about that defense and what they would not and would allow you to do. That's how they got there, is that they knew what the system was. They maxed it out with 100% effort, and they got to the championship game. They didn't win it, but they got there. Ron Rivera says he wants to go to Super Bowls while he's in Washington. That's his expectation. And in order to reach that, he told the team, you need to look at Adrian Peterson, you need to look at Thomas Davis, because those guys know what it takes to succeed. So if they buy into that, if they condition themselves correctly, which I believe Ron Rivera and his staff will absolutely do, and they start to enjoy just a bit of success, I think that they have the coaching staff that understands, one, how to maintain that, how to make adjustments, because that was another thing with Jay's teams, is that they could get out to those leads or they could get behind. They did not make good adjustments. I don't have that same sneaking suspicion about Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, or Scott Turner having an issue making adjustments in games to account for different things.
You touched a bit on Jordan Brailford. I'm going to ask you to expand on that just a little bit, because, I mean, he went to Booker T. Washington, which is in my hometown, went to Oklahoma State. There were a lot of folks that thought that he should have stayed and thought that 7th round was just a little too low for him. If not, should have been maybe a 3rd, 4th round selection. And yet what I'm hearing from you is he's having a hell of a training camp.
He was having a hell of a training camp last year before he got injured. And I knew as soon as I said, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm talking to somebody who is in Oklahoma. I should have.
That's all right. No, you're there now. I appreciate it.
It's okay. It's all good. And it came to me after the fact, like, oh, yeah. But just no, Jordan, I've had a chance to see him last year. Seemed like a really nice guy, got injured during training camp. He was going off last year doing OTAs, just having a field day. And I used to notice him in the 3rd team and moving up to the 2nd team and how much chaos he was creating. Now he's working with a lot of the 2nd team, and it's still the same level of chaos. And of course, part of it is the fact that this offensive line is trying to figure out who's going to be the starters on the left-hand side, and they are trying to work different groups out. So there is some benefit to the defense that, like, look, we know who our set group is for the most part. Like, we know who our rotation is going to be also for the most part. And so that's an advantage that the offensive line does not have. But he's just wreaking havoc. I mean, he's using different moves. He tried to use a spin move. I think it was Wednesday against Cornelius Lucas. Didn't work. But he used a speed move that did, and he got around to the quarterback. Same idea. I saw him a lot of times last year bullying the offensive lineman that he was going up against. And he just got derailed by the injury. I mean, it was really simple. I thought he was going to add some substantial depth to this team last year, and I feel the same way now, having seen how he's come back and just the fire that he's playing with. And again, like, this coaching staff they love their rotation. They want their depth to be good. If in a moment's notice we need you to step up, we want to know that we have somebody that there's no drop off, basically. And frankly, with this defensive line, there isn't a great deal of drop off. There's a lot of different ways they could play it. Keep in mind, they have a Jordan Brailford. They could have a Jordan Brailford in. They could have a Chase Young in. They could have a Deron Payne in. They could have a Matt Ioannidis, or swap it out with Jonathan Allen, or swapping him out with Tim Settle. And they still feel like they're going to get to the quarterback, because all these guys are playing fast. They're not having to think about what to do. Their one goal, that the one thing Jack Del Rio is telling them to do, get to the quarterback. Beat your man, get to the quarterback. That's all they were worried about. They're not worried about if the running back comes out. They're not worried about, is this guy coming in the block? Nope. Just, if you see it, find a way to beat your man, get to the quarterback. That is it. And he's having himself a good old time.
One of the stories that you wrote here recently that I just want to briefly touch on is about Bryce Love and his return. what was it like for you to report that story, and what have you learned about Bryce? Because he's one of my favorite dudes in college, and I thought he was going to have a great year, and then tears his ACL, and he seems like he has an opportunity, but Thomas Davis, Adrian Peterson are also at that position.
You said Bryce Love, the running back, or somebody else?
Bryce Love, yes, the running back.
Or are you talking about Ryan Anderson? You said because they're at the same position, so I'm just trying to make sure I'm talking about the right guy.
I'm talking about it running back. I'm talking.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about the dude that went to Stanford, December 8th, 2018. Yeah, this is your 21st story, August 21st story. Sorry.
Okay. When you said the linebackers, I got confused.
No, my bad.
No. Don't worry about it. Bryce is cool. He is. I saw him last year when he was on the sideline, working through his injury and everything else like that, rehabbing, and he's kind of like Chase Young in a way. When he's not on the field, he doesn't look happy he's not on the field, which I get after this is what you want to do, and you finally get back out here after there was the uncertainty with COVID and everything else like that. I get it, but he walks around with a smile every single day. He is the happiest looking guy on the planet. And if you watch the video of the interviews that we did with him the day, was it Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday, yeah. He just was grinning the entire time. Or was it Thursday? It might have been Thursday. I really don't remember the day, so don't. But the point being is that he just has fun. I talked about at the top of my story the fact that I hadn't seen him all of the final practice on Thursday, right, because they have Thursday and Friday off. I didn't see him all of Thursday. And then I see him gallivanting out here in a yellow jersey, and he's about to rush the passer. And I'm like, what in the world? It's the scout team. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's having a good old time. He's chit-chatting. He's playing safety. He's got this big old smile on his face, just bouncing around. He bounces. He is so ecstatic to be back out on the field. And it's nice to see that. I think sometimes people don't realize how much fun it is for the players. It's a ton of work. It's more work than anybody would ever humanly imagine. And we only see part of it. We don't see what they do when they're doing their off-season training by themselves, or how they change their eating, or any of that stuff like that, or they're going through the rehab process. We don't see any of that stuff. We see a very small fraction of what these guys do when it comes to training and getting themselves ready for the actual regular season. So he's going through one of the toughest parts. They're practicing harder than they're going to actually play the games. And he's loving it because he had football taken away from him for 20 months. And and I said this in my story, similar to Alex Smith, you realize that there are people that would still be in your position. They go through the ACL tear, they go through the broken leg. If there was a chance, even a sliver of hope, that they may be able to go back out there and play football, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that would trade places with them and go through this experience if it meant that they get to be on the field on Sundays and play with their, they call them their brothers, and their teammates. And so my impression of Bryce is somebody who loves the sport, who loves the game, who enjoys this opportunity, and is actually very much looking forward to playing with Scott Turner's offense because, again, as I pointed out and other people have pointed out, his college teammate, Christian McCaffrey, had himself a field day last year. And previously, in other offenses run in Carolina, obviously Scott Turner took over as the offensive coordinator when Ron Rivera was fired in the 12th game of the season. So it wasn't he didn't run the playbook for the entire year, but just he had success in Carolina. Ron alluded to the fact that they have a similar zone read offense in Scott Turner's offense that he ran at Stanford. And so he fits right in. And seeing what Christian McCaffrey did, Bryce Love is sitting there looking around like, I could really have some fun in this scheme. And so far, it's looked like he's had a lot of success. He's fluid. He's gotten hit, bounced back up. Still, I think the thing is learning how fast these holes close in the NFL at some level. Sometimes hesitating, trying to determine which lane to pick. Sometimes can be a bit of a challenge, but turns of catching the ball out of the backfield, he's had a good job with. When he has gotten to his lanes and gotten through them quickly, he's not an easy guy to bring down. He sits like a ball, like a very large construction ball, like he would hit you and it hurt type of a situation. He just looks like he's loving life right now. He's absorbing everything, and he's happy to be back in this position. And it looks like he has a legitimate chance to, if not be the second feature back in this system, but the third one. Peyton Barber has gotten a lot of reps there as well, too. So just kind of monitoring and seeing how that plays out. But basically, he's looked like an integral part of what they're planning to do here.
That is Rhiannon Walker, who covers the Washington football team for The Athletic and is an SJI alumna. Stand up. And I sincerely appreciate you taking half an hour out of your day and what I know is going to be an even busier week to talk with me about this team, about Jason Wright, and about yourself. Thank you, Rhiannon.
No, of course, RJ, it's no problem at all. And SGI alums got to stand up for each other and everything else like that. I appreciate you for having me on. I appreciate you giving me 30 minutes to talk with you. I had a lot of fun. I know I didn't have the one answer, but this was good. I enjoyed this on Saturday. This was a good conversation.
Right on.